in Ukraine. He was speaking after talks were held today in Saudi Arabia, where Russian and American diplomats discussed ending Russia's 3-year campaign. More on those talks in a moment. But first, let's go straight to Washington and to our North America editor, Sarah Smith. Sarah, what more did the president say?
Well, he said he thinks he's the only person in the world who can end this war, as well as saying that he has the power to end it. And also repeating that if he had been in the White House 3 years ago, this war would never have begun. Now, he's said that before, but he's always implied that that was because Vladimir Putin would not have dared to invade Ukraine if Donald Trump had been the president of the United States. But speaking a few minutes ago from his Florida residence in Mar-a-Lago, he seemed to be blaming Ukraine for not having made a deal with Russia prior to the invasion. He seemed to be saying that if he had been in office, then he would have forced a deal that anybody, he said, could have negotiated a better deal where they would have given up a little bit of land, not too much, and been able to avoid this war. Have a listen to what he had to say.
I think I have the power to end this war, and I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way.
Now, of course, when he was saying that Ukraine was complaining about not being invited, that was because they were not part of those talks that took place between America and Russia in Saudi Arabia today. Now, from the State Department, from Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, we heard that those were not negotiations about how to end the war. They were simply initial talks between America and Russia, who will now put together top teams who will speak to each other about the parameters of how the war might end. And the Secretary of State was very clear. He said if they do get to the point of actually negotiating what a peace deal or a ceasefire might look like, at that point Ukraine will be brought into the talks and some European nations will be consulted. But for now, those talks are very much between only the United States and Russia.
Thank you very much, Sarah Smith there in Washington. Well, there were extraordinary scenes in Saudi Arabia where Russian and American diplomats on opposite sides for so many years held 4 hours of talks aimed at ending the war in Ukraine. One of those at the table, the Russian foreign minister, is even under US sanctions for the part he's played in the war. The two countries agreed to press ahead with negotiations. The talks are part of a flurry of diplomacy focused on Ukraine this week. Crucially, as you heard, neither Ukraine nor Europe were invited to the talks with US and Russian officials, which took place in Riyadh this morning.